Come to the urgent question. Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask the Home Secretary if he will make a statement on yesterday's High Court judgment in Belfast disapplying the Illegal Migration Act 2023 in Northern Ireland.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me start by expressing the Government's disappointment at this judgment. We continue to believe that our policy is lawful, that our approach is compatible with international law, and specifically that the Illegal Migration Act proposals are compatible with Article 2 of the Windsor Framework. The Government will take all steps to defend its position, including through an appeal. We have consistently made clear that the rights commitments in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement should be interpreted as they were always intended and not expanded to cover issues like illegal migration. This judgment changes nothing about our operational plans to send illegal migrants to Rwanda this July, or the lawfulness of our Safety of Rwanda Act. We continue to work to get regular flights off to Rwanda in the coming weeks, and nothing will distract us from that or deliver into the timetable that I have set out. We must start the flights to stop the boats. The Government has consistently applied immigration law on a UK-wide basis. It is important to remember that those who have been served a notice for removal to Rwanda are being considered under the Nationality and Borders Act and the Safety of Rwanda Act. This judgment relates to the Illegal Migration Act, so does not impact our operations or planning for Rwanda. Mr. Speaker, preparations to begin flights within weeks are continuing at pace. As the Prime Minister has made clear, nothing will distract us from the job of implementing the Rwanda policy. We must start the flights to stop the boats. That is the fair thing to do. It is the right thing to do for our country, and it is the humane thing to do. Our conviction that the Rwanda scheme is lawful and necessary is unchanged. We are acting in the national interest, and we will not be deterred.
Gavin Robinson.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker, for the response, and I thank the Minister and the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland for being present today. But we need not be here, Mr. Speaker. The issues that were elucidated yesterday by the High Court in Belfast were fairly and thoroughly explored in this House and in the other place during both the passage of the Illegal Migration Act and the Safety of Rwanda Act as well. And when I and my colleagues raised these concerns here in Parliament, we were told by the Government we were wrong. And yet the High Court yesterday in Belfast said we were right. And the only difference between the encroachment on the application of our sovereign immigration policy in Northern Ireland, as with the rest of the United Kingdom, for the Illegal Migration Act is that a case was advanced on the basis of the Illegal Migration Act, and yet one in the Safety of Rwanda Act has not yet been considered. But the Government will know that the rationale outlined yesterday by the High Court for the Illegal Migration Act will similarly apply to the Safety of Rwanda Act as well. And it need not be so. Though the Government chose to dismiss the concerns that we outlined in this House, and our colleagues did in the other place, they had an opportunity to put this issue beyond doubt. I tabled an amendment, New Clause 3, along with my colleagues, giving the Government the opportunity to put the issue to bed, to maintain the integrity of this country's sovereign immigration policy and to maintain the integrity and protection of our borders, and they chose not to do so. Mr. Speaker, I was going to ask, and I am grateful that the Minister has indicated his willingness to appeal. But can I also ask why, when they had the opportunity to put this issue beyond doubt, they did not? Do they recognise that in not doing so, they have significantly impaired the uniformity of the UK's immigration policy? In 1922, long before the EU was envisaged, long before the UK joined, and long after we departed, the islands of Great Britain and Ireland had an integrity in immigration policy. The common travel area applied. So I'd be interested to hear, as it did then, as it does now, what steps the government are taking to get a British Isles solution to immigration outside of the control of the EU and outside, as it is, of the Schengen area. And finally, Mr Speaker, and I am grateful, what steps the Minister and his government will take to assert Parliament's sovereign will to protect the borders of the United Kingdom.
Well done. Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman who, as ever, eloquently makes his case. And I'm grateful to him for the constructive tone that he has taken, and I also note the narrative that he has advanced. The government is considering, as you would expect, Mr Speaker, the judgment very carefully, and we are taking legal advice around that. But I can reconfirm, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, that the government intends to appeal this judgment. We've consistently made clear that the rights commitments in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement should be interpreted as they were always intended and not expanded to cover reserved issues like illegal migration. And we are also equally clear that immigration is a reserved matter, which has always been applied uniformly across the UK. We do not accept that the Good Friday Agreement should be read so creatively as to extend to matters such as tackling illegal migration, which is a UK-wide issue and not in any way related to the original intention of the Good Friday Agreement. On the specific point in relation to the common travel area, all immigration legislation provides a UK-wide framework for legal and illegal migration. We continue to have a constructive working relationship with the Irish government when it comes to ensuring that abuse of the common travel area is robustly and appropriately tackled. And when it comes to the very specific point about asserting Parliament's sovereign will around these matters, the recent Safety of Rwanda Act, I would argue, very clearly asserts Parliament's sovereign will. Whilst this latest judgment relates to the IMA, we are committed to appealing it.
Chair of the Northern Ireland Select Committee, Sir Robert Buckland.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This case, together with the case a few months ago about the Legacy Act, has a common theme within it. That is the applicability of Article 2 of the Windsor Framework and the direct application of EU law. Now, what is the government going to do about that? With regard to an appeal, is it going to seek to expedite the matter directly to the Supreme Court? Because it seems to me that this is a fundamental issue that needs resolving. And secondly, is it going to seek further clarification, either via the Joint Committee for the protocol or indeed through other means, to clarify the situation, to protect non-devolved matters from being dealt with in this way?
I'm always very grateful for the contributions of my right honourable friend who speaks with real authority on these matters, given his professional background, but also his role in this House and also as a former distinguished Secretary of State and Lord Chancellor. He will recognise that the court will make its final order in 2 weeks, and that is when an appeal can be brought. He's made a number of observations there that I know that we as ministers will reflect upon as part of the decisions that we take. But as I said, and as the Prime Minister has made very clear, it is our intention to appeal this judgment. We think that it is right and proper that we take all steps necessary to defend our position.
Shadow Minister Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. Well, the Conservative chaos continues. It truly beggars belief that just a matter of weeks after the Prime Minister negotiated the Windsor Framework in February of last year, he promptly brought forward a piece of immigration legislation which appears to have left Northern Ireland with immigration rules that are different to the rest of the UK's. These concerns around the Illegal Migration Act were raised at the time by the Honourable Member for Belfast, Right Honourable Member for Belfast East, as he's just pointed out. So why did the government choose to ignore his warnings? I don't believe that the Minister answered the questions that the Right Honourable Member for Belfast East just put to him. Mr Speaker, we on these benches are utterly committed to upholding both the Good Friday Agreement and the Windsor Framework in all their dimensions. But this government appears to be more committed to its failing Illegal Migration Act. So can the Minister assure the House that nothing this government does will in any way compromise the Good Friday Agreement or the Windsor Framework? Now, for those who are understandably struggling to keep up with the never-ending stream of immigration legislation that's been flowing from this government, the Illegal Migration Act was the second of 3 bills, all of which had one goal in mind, sending asylum seekers to Rwanda, but all of which are completely failing on their own terms. It has been a shambles from start to finish. Meanwhile, we on these benches are clear about the problem we face, Mr. Speaker. Large numbers of desperate asylum seekers are crossing continents, exploited by criminal smuggling gangs operating the English Channel and being met by an incompetent and clueless Conservative government that has lost control of our borders and is addicted to headline-chasing gimmicks. In contrast, the Labour Party would never have gone down the Rwanda rabbit hole. Instead of wasting taxpayer money on Rwanda, we would introduce a new Border Security Command with extra resource and new powers to go after those criminal gangs. And instead of using expensive asylum hotels, we will deliver our backlog clearance plan and new returns unit to remove people with no right to be in the UK. So could I once again urge the Minister to stop flogging this dead horse of a Rwanda policy and instead to adopt Labour's pragmatic plan to stop the Tory small boats chaos and fix our broken asylum system.
Thank you.
Well said. Same week, different rant, and week on week we hear the same rant about the opposition's position on these issues. The fact is that they have absolutely no credible plan to stop the flow of people coming across the Channel. I simply do not accept his characterisation of the situation. And let me be very clear for him. Yes, we will, and we are committed to upholding our legal obligations. But the Safety of Rwanda Act does not engage the Good Friday Agreement, including the rights chapter. Those rights seek to address long-standing and specific issues relating to Northern Ireland's past and do not extend to matters engaged by the Act. And I should also just reiterate for him, because perhaps he missed this, that we're operationalising the Rwanda policy on the basis of the Nationality and Borders Act. When it comes to the very scant alternative that he has proffered to the House again today as the opposition frontbench's position and offering to the country to tackle illegal migration, I can again tell him that we've already doubled funding for the National Crime Agency for immigration crime purposes. We already have thousands of officials working on this work as part of the Migration and Borders Directorate. What his policy means in practice is a migrant amnesty, letting thousands of illegal migrants who shouldn't be here stay in the UK indefinitely. He would end the Rwanda scheme, and his leader has been very clear that he would end that come what may, but the fact is it is already working and deterring people from making these crossings in the first place. They would allow tens of thousands of claims to be lodged outside the United Kingdom, undoing all the progress that we have made, Mr. Speaker, in addressing the asylum backlog. And they would also do a deal with the European Union, but one which won't stop the boats. Taking 100,000 asylum seekers every year from EU countries, I don't think that that's a credible offering to the country. The fact is, they just don't get it. They're trying to take the public for fools. Fortunately, we have a plan. We're getting on and delivering on that plan, and we are delivering results, and we will see it through.
Sir William Cash.
Speaker, will my honourable friend indicate the extent to which the framing of the Illegal Migration Act 2023 and the Windsor Framework and the Withdrawal Agreement Act 2020 in respect of the sovereignty of the United Kingdom as a whole, including Northern Ireland, could have contained sufficiently clear and unambiguous words so as to remove the grounds upon which this judgment has been made, in line with the disapplication principles as set out in paragraph 144 of the Supreme Court judgment relating to Rwanda in November last year, which is extremely clear.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question and contribution. I would refer him and all honourable and right honourable members back to the position that I have set out, and we are clear as a government that the will of Parliament has been expressed in relation to these issues. The position is as per that I've set out, and we will robustly defend it.
We now come to SNP's first person, Alison Poulas.
The SNP welcome this judgment from the High Court of Belfast and thank the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and the other individual case for taking this forward. It is important that these awful pieces of legislation are challenged. And I would note to the Minister that this judgment came from a domestic court, not from an international court that they seem so terribly afraid of and consistently running down. The Court found that the Illegal Migration Act was incompatible with Article 2 of the Windsor Framework, with the ECHR, with Sections 2, 5 and 6 of the Legal Migration Act, leading to a diminution of rights. The Court also found incompatibility with the Human Rights Act in respect of the duty to remove, obligations to potential victims of modern slavery and human trafficking, and on responsibilities to children and on their best interests, all matters that were extremely serious and can remain of concern. As the Right Honourable Member from Belfast East said, all of this was entirely predictable. The implications for the Good Friday Agreement were warned about through the course of the Illegal Migration Act and also through the course of the Rwanda Act. So can he say why his government failed to heed the warnings, the expert advice? Why did they ignore the status of Northern Ireland? And what now for the applicability of the Rwanda Act in Northern Ireland? Mr Speaker, I and my fellow Scottish MPs are disturbed that our own constituents, our neighbours and friends are not afforded the same rights even as those in Northern Ireland. So what does he regard as the implications for this for the future of the Union? Because human rights should be for all of us.
Hear, hear.
I think I can probably answer this fairly rapidly, Mr Speaker, in the sense that we fully understand the position of the Scottish National Party, as has been consistently expressed during the passage of the various pieces of legislation. They don't support the government in its efforts to tackle illegal migration head-on. But what I can say is that the position is that which I've already described. I'm not going to give a running commentary around what is ongoing litigation, but we are determined to appeal this judgment. We are currently taking legal advice around it. And I can also just be very clear, as I've said previously, that this judgment changes nothing about our operational plans to send illegal migrants to Rwanda this July, or the lawfulness of our Safety of Rwanda Act. And when it comes to some of the concerns that I know have been expressed about migrants flocking to Northern Ireland to avoid deportation to Rwanda, there is absolutely no benefit whatsoever of doing so. We're operationalising this policy on the NABA basis.
Swallow Braverman.
My honourable friend for coming to the Chamber. I hope he's enjoying life back at the Home Office. In the decision, Mr Speaker, the judge found that Section 7A of the Withdrawal Agreement Act, as amended by the Windsor Framework, must be read to mean that Northern Ireland is effectively to be treated as part of the European Union. I believe the assurances made to me at the time, but Mr Speaker, isn't it now patently clear that the Windsor Framework has operated in a way to undermine our sovereignty, to undermine Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom, and I'm afraid has fundamentally failed upon its first contact with reality?
I would refer the Right Honourable Lady to the position that I've described in terms of our determination to appeal this judgment. As she knows with real experience, immigration is a reserved matter, and there should be consistent application across the UK, as we have done consistently to date.
Anna?
The European Convention on Human Rights isn't just a key part of the UK's unwritten constitution, it's of course fundamental to the Good Friday Agreement. That's where the commitment to the vindication of rights flows from. But yes, Brexit and the provisions that have followed have underpinned those rights and have allowed for the pursuance of a remedy. and perhaps those who champion the Brexit project might at times better step through the consequences of their actions in future. I'm glad our region has additional protection, but the ruling is very clear. This bill is not compatible with human rights, and the declaration of incompatibility has implications in all jurisdictions. Isn't it time then that the government instead developed an actual strategy through safe routes, through actually targeting people smuggling gangs, through investing in efficient processing? Isn't it time that we had an actual plan instead of this £400 million performance of cruelty?
I profoundly disagree with her on her stance on Brexit. I disagree respectfully with her on her interpretation and characterisation of the situation that we are discussing today in the House. And what I would say is, in relation to safe and legal routes, we have seen over 500,000 people come via safe and legal routes to this country since 2015. That is something that I think we can all be enormously proud of as a country. But there is a moral imperative to shut down these evil criminal gangs that are responsible for bringing people across the Channel, taking their money, sending them to sea in unseaworthy vessels with no regard whatsoever as to human life and whether they arrive safely. We will do everything that is necessary and within our power to put those evil criminal gangs responsible out of business. We've made progress through the plan that has been delivered today, but this is the important next step to render that business model redundant, and I would urge her to rethink her position. It is not good enough to simply say it's all too difficult and just allow unlimited numbers of people to make those very dangerous crossings with no alternative country to relocate those people to when there is no prospect of being able to remove them to their country of origin.
Robert.
We voted in a referendum to end the rule of EU law throughout the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland. Isn't the only way out of this, given the muddle the courts are creating, to have an urgent short piece of legislation which asserts beyond doubt that we control our own borders?
As a government, that we have a legal basis. I recognise my right honourable friend's determination for us to get on and deliver on the Rwanda policy. That is precisely what we are doing on the basis of the Nationality and Borders Act at this stage. But when it comes to the IMA, we believe that we have a strong legal basis, and that's why we're appealing the judgment.
Tim Farron.
Across the United Kingdom, including, of course, Northern Ireland, there are now 90,000 of our fellow human beings who've arrived in the UK since March last year who are in limbo. Their claims are not even being triaged, awaiting a third country to take them. These folks, most of whom the government knows will turn out to be genuine refugees if their cases are ever assessed, are nevertheless sat rotting at the taxpayer's expense, vulnerable to exploitation, unable to move on. For the majority, who even this government admits will never ever go to Rwanda, what is the government's plan for those 90,000 souls?
We are committed very clearly to commencing the Illegal Migration Act as soon as possible. He will note the work that has gone on within the Home Office over the course of the last year or so that has dramatically improved asylum decision-making productivity, all those efforts which would be out the window were the opposition frontbench to form a government. The fact is that we will take appropriate operational decisions around individual cohorts. I'm not going to get into that on the floor of the House today, but the fact is, and he keeps chuntering from a sedentary position, we take appropriate cohort-related decisions. But the message must be very clear that people should not be coming to the United Kingdom via small boat, making those perilous journeys. That is not an acceptable position to be advocating. We will not advocate that position, and we will continue to take steps to address it. And the message should go out very clearly to anyone thinking of getting in a small boat: don't do it.
Teresa Villiers.
I think that many people in Northern Ireland will want to understand the practical implications of this court case. So if, as some expect, it means that Northern Ireland has become a more attractive place to go to for someone who's arrived in Britain on a small boat, what's the government doing to investigate that, to plan for it, to manage it, and to make sure that it doesn't have cost implications for the Northern Ireland Executive or local authorities in Northern Ireland?
What I can say to my right honourable friend, who of course takes a real interest in relation to all matters Northern Ireland, is that we are operationalising the Rwanda policy on a UK-wide basis. The legal foundation for that is utilising the Nationality and Borders Act. And as I was able to say earlier, there is no benefit to anybody who thinks that going to Northern Ireland will lead to them not being within scope of relocation to Rwanda. That is not the case. The position is clear, and we are getting on and operationalising this policy using the legal footing that is already available to us.
Sammy Wilson.
The government can make as many appeals as it wants, as many promises from the dispatch box, and as many agreements about safeguarding the Union. The fact remains that because of the pathetic handover of Northern Ireland to the EU, the judge made it clear yesterday that EU law now extends and has to be applied in Northern Ireland. And the result is that we have another hole in the government's immigration policy, a national immigration policy now dictated by the EU. Northern Ireland will become a back door into the United Kingdom, and it will hasten the day when we will have people controls between Northern Ireland as well as and GB as well as goods controls. Does the Minister recognise that unless we remove the source of this, namely the commitments in the withdrawal agreement, this will continue?
I don't think there's any question whatsoever of any merit in the suggestion that the UK would hand Northern Ireland over to the European Union. And in relation to this matter that we are debating today, this judgment changes nothing about our operational plans to send illegal migrants to Rwanda this July, or the lawfulness of our Safety of Rwanda Act. We continue to work to get regular flights off to Rwanda in the coming weeks, and nothing will distract us from that or delivering to the timetable I set out. We must start the flights to stop the boats. I've been consistently clear that the commitments in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement should be interpreted as they were always intended and not expanded to cover issues like illegal migration. We will take all steps to defend that position, including through appeal. Those are the words of the Prime Minister. As I say, we are operationalising the Rwanda policy on a UK-wide basis, and we will see through the commitments we've made.
What, Francois?
Sir, on the Windsor framework, we told you so. On the judgment itself, legally, all roads lead not to Rome, but in this case to Strasbourg and the European Convention on Human Rights. The Convention was drafted for perfectly honourable reasons in the aftermath of the horror of the Second World War, but over 70 years ago, and it's now clearly been overtaken by events and international migration flows. So hasn't the time now come for a Conservative government to include in our election manifesto a clear commitment to seek to renegotiate this convention with our European partners, but should those negotiations fail, to leave? Because if we aren't prepared to walk away, they'll never take us seriously.
I refer my right honourable friend to the government's stance around the legal position in relation to the Illegal Migration Act. And I would also just say that for illegal migrants, all roads lead to Rwanda, and for the people smugglers who are responsible for this evil criminality, all roads lead to prison.
Stephen Farry.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I strongly welcome this logical and inevitable judgment from the High Court in Northern Ireland. And if the government wants to have a national policy around immigration, then repeal the Illegal Migration Act, repeal the Rwanda Act, and have a human rights compliant policy. Back in 1998, the government of the UK and Ireland gave a solemn pledge to the people of Northern Ireland, everyone residing in the community, that their rights would be protected. So in pursuing this rabbit hole of the Rwanda plan, can the Minister give a cast-iron assurance that under no circumstances will Article 2 of the Windsor Framework be unpicked, and also under no circumstances will the Good Friday Agreement be unpicked?
I refer him to the position that I've set out in relation to the Good Friday Agreement. I'm not going to give a running commentary about the litigation, which he will appreciate is ongoing. What I absolutely definitively disagree with him on is the utility or sense in repealing the various pieces of illegal migration legislation that he is so vehemently against. I respectfully disagree with him on this issue. It is helping us to make the progress that we need to put those criminal gangs out of business and ultimately save lives in the Channel. I don't think that there is anything more serious for a government than that, and we place that front and centre in the work we're doing.
Tom Hunt.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear to me that Northern Ireland has just as much right as everywhere else in the UK to have a deterrent to illegal migration, so aspects of this do concern me. But a few weeks ago, the Irish government was saying that they should be able to return some illegal migrants who may have gone from the UK to the Republic of Ireland. Do you think the government of the Republic of Ireland would be better taking that up with France? And actually, if the French returned illegal migrants who entered our country, we probably wouldn't be in this problem in the first place.
No hard border. As I said at this very dispatch box, I think it was last week, the position is very clear that we are not willing to have that relationship with the Irish government to take the return of illegal migrants forward. That is something that would need to be progressed at an EU level. We think that the European Union should take back those illegal migrants, and I think that that goes to the heart of the point that he's made.
Gregory Campbell.
Speaker, the Minister thus far hasn't taken the opportunity to respond to my right honourable friend's query about why the government declined the offer that was made from these benches that would have avoided the judgment that we've just heard about. Can he now do that? And also, can he indicate that he has already said the government plan to appeal? If the appeal fails, what then?
I don't think it's wise to speculate on hypothetical situations. We are determined that there is a strong legislative basis and we will defend it through the appeal. In terms of the position in previous debates around the legislation, which are debates that are in the past and have been and gone, he will recognise that I was not the Minister at that time, but it's fair to say that the record will speak for itself in terms of the debates that were had.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have to look at the situation in Dublin to see what happens when illegal migration becomes an issue and isn't handled correctly, and also the strength of us now pursuing the Rwanda policy. And whilst it's been dismissed by some, it's interesting, I'm sure the Minister would have noticed, how actually others across Europe are starting to look to it for a solution to the question which could never be answered on the other side of, if not Rwanda, where do you want to remove people to? But can the Minister, in the light of this judgment, reassure me on a couple of points? One, that the UK border will remain the UK border in terms of migration policy, that there is no prospect of having any form of people checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, effectively a border within the UK. And the second, that the operation of the Rwanda plan is based on, as he said, the NABA and on the recently passed legislation, as you know, NABA with the one-stop shop and the child age assessments, which were vital in terms of getting a grip on this issue, and that is where they're taking it forward rather than on the core point from this judgment, which was the Act last year.
My honourable friend always speaks with authority when it comes to these issues, and obviously has extensive experience as a Minister in the Home Office. I can absolutely say that we will continue to apply migration policy on a UK-wide basis, that the UK border will remain that. And he's right to highlight, and he should be proud actually of the efforts that he took forward in government to help deliver the Nationality and Borders Act, which members opposite consistently opposed. In answer to the point about the question of where they would send people to, we're still none the wiser. I know he asked that question a few weeks ago. But the truth is that the basis upon which we're able to advance this at this stage is the Nationality and Borders Act, and he can be confident in that basis, and we are getting on and delivering on it.
Joanna Cherry.
Deputy Speaker, this judgment, of course, has UK-wide relevance because of the declarations of incompatibility under the Human Rights Act. And in our reports on the Illegal Migration Act and the Rwandan policy, the Joint Committee on Human Rights have repeatedly warned that many aspects of the government's asylum policy breach the Human Rights Act. And that wasn't just our view, it was the weight of the expert evidence that we heard. In fact, those with legal expertise who disagreed with our findings were decidedly thin on the ground. And this judgment vindicates our position that on a number of fronts the government's asylum policy breaches the Human Rights Act, particularly as regards the duty to remove. So can I ask the Minister this? Will he confirm that the government will respect the rule of law, and not take any steps to deport anyone under the Rwanda scheme until the relevant avenues of appeal in this case are exhausted and it's clarified that such removals would be lawful.
I know that the Honourable and Learned Lady is vehemently opposed to the government's position when it comes to tackling illegal migration. My right honourable friend, the Minister for Countering Illegal Migration, is in front of her committee, I believe, tomorrow. I've got no doubt that she will want to ask these questions of him. But to go back to the key thrust of her question, the basis upon which we are facilitating relocations to Rwanda at this stage is on the Nationality and Borders Act footing, which is not relevant to the Illegal Migration Act judgment that we're dealing with today.
David Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We were already aware that the Northern Ireland Protocol, or Windsor Framework, whichever one prefers to call it, had resulted in a customs border in the Irish Sea. It now appears to be the case, if this judgment stands, that it's destroyed the ability of the United Kingdom government to determine who should remain within our own borders. Does my honourable friend therefore not agree that the framework has been proven to be inimical to British sovereignty, and that it should be renegotiated, or failing that, as my right honourable friend for Wokingham has suggested, it should be disapplied by legislation of this Parliament?
I wouldn't accept that characterisation, and as I've said and confirmed for the House now a number of times, we are taking forward the Rwanda partnership on the basis of the Nationality and Borders Act. That is the legal footing that at this stage we are advancing the policy. I am confident in that legal foundation, and we will appeal this judgment that relates very specifically to the Illegal Migration Act.
Carla Lockhart.
Deputy Speaker, Secretary of State, what else are the government not telling of where the EU has overreached into Northern Ireland and where people in Northern Ireland are once again in limbo between two regulatory entities? Therefore, will the Secretary of State and the government do the right thing and stop stringing the people of Northern Ireland along by simply appealing the decision? And would he commit to legislate to get rid of the EU supremacy on human rights through Article 2 of the Windsor Framework?
What I can say is that Article 2 of the Windsor Framework does ensure that there is no diminution of rights under the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We have been consistently clear that the commitments in the Good Friday Agreement should be implemented as they were always intended and not expanded to cover issues like illegal migration. And rightly, we will take all steps to defend that position, including through this appeal.
Sir Christopher Cho.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we will all sympathise with the Minister for having to take a line to take which is manifestly absurd. Why is it that the government is not going to directly legislate to deal with this situation? That the legislation is defective. If we go to appeal and we then find the appeal is rejected, then we've lost a lot more time. Why don't we act now to legislate and sort out this mess?
I think my honourable friend will appreciate the fact that we are currently taking legal advice in relation to this judgment. It would not be right to give a running commentary on the substance of that. He will know that as a minister I'm not in a position to disclose that legal advice in any event, but we will robustly defend the position. But the outcome that he wishes to see, which is the operationalisation of the Rwanda policy to facilitate those relocations, has a legislative basis in the Nationality and Borders Act, which the good news is that he was one of the colleagues that was in the division lobby supporting, and which I think his constituents would welcome.
Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government were repeatedly warned over the pitfalls of the Windsor Framework. The government has been repeatedly warned and advised over the deficiencies in the Rwanda legislation. What's the Minister going to do to ensure that, as a result of the government's sloppy and defective drafting of legislation, ensure that the only winners out of this aren't the lawyers, as always?
We are not going to be thwarted in our efforts to ensure that people are relocated to Rwanda with the ultimate aim of putting out of business the evil criminal gangs responsible for that heinous trade of people that puts lives at risk and exploits people for their money, there is a legal basis upon which we are taking that policy forward in the immediacy. That is happening. People are being detained for the purposes of that relocation. Caseworkers are caseworking individual cases, and there are also arrangements that are in place to facilitate those flights. That is where our focus and our energies are at this present time, but we're also appealing when it comes to the Illegal Migration Act itself.
Richard Graham.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister has already confirmed that the Government will appeal against the Belfast High Court judgment and that our commitment to the Belfast Agreement is unwavering. So the real issue is on the substantive issue of the plan to process asylum seekers' applications in Rwanda, which the opposition front bench continue to say shouldn't, couldn't and won't work. Will my honourable friend confirm that not only are they wrong on all three of those points, but that events in Ireland have shown how effective a deterrent this is going to prove, and also that Italy, France, Denmark, and indeed I think the political party of the EU President have already said that this sets a very interesting precedent and one that they would be looking to pursue themselves?
I'm afraid that the opposition front bench are invariably wrong when it comes to these issues, and he is right to touch on the fact that while we were at the forefront back in 2022 in announcing the Rwanda partnership, others are now following. We recognise as a government and have consistently said that this is a novel approach to tackling this issue, but these challenges require novel solutions, and I think it is right, and the Home Secretary is leading this effort internationally as well, that we do look at novel ways of tackling these migratory flows that are organised and facilitated by evil criminality. And I think the point that he makes is one that is becoming ever more relevant. In fact, only this morning I saw additional reports of other countries exploring these very sorts of arrangements.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Belfast City Council has the second highest number of asylum seekers in all of the United Kingdom. That gives you an idea of how important this issue is for us in Northern Ireland. Can the Minister confirm that there is still a freedom of movement within the United Kingdom, and we can subsequently, under the policy of dispersal, move any asylum seekers to GB mainland to be directed, determined and dealt with as this Government sees fit, and that this court judgment will not preclude the constitutional and legal position of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom until a border poll consent determined otherwise, which indeed is the very foundation of the Good Friday Agreement?
There were various technical aspects bound up in that question. If I may, I will take that particular series of points away and provide him with a written response. But what I can say in top-line terms is that when it comes to the application of the Rwanda policy, we are delivering this on a UK-wide basis.
Sir Mike Penning.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've sat and listened to all the questions from across the House. So as I'm the last one, can I say to the Minister, I personally and my constituents are I feel very worried about immigration, and if the Rwanda policy works that this House decided to do, then that should happen and it should be a deterrent. But what is obvious from across the House today, there is a concern about the union. This country is about a union of countries together. And can I ask the Minister to make sure that all departments in government understand the concerns of our colleagues from Northern Ireland and across the House, that we must protect the union at all costs?
This government will always, always, always uphold the union in both letter and in spirit. He is right to highlight the importance of this issue to his constituents in Hemel Hempstead and the important issue of tackling illegal migration head-on. He can be absolutely assured that Home Office ministers take our responsibilities to the Union incredibly seriously. I think it's very welcome the fact that I'm joined by Northern Ireland Office colleagues on the front bench for this statement today, and it gives the opportunity, I think, to really demonstrate the fact that we do work as one government on this issue. It's incumbent on all ministers to uphold the Union and its importance to our great country in every sense.
I thank the Minister for answering the urgent question, and we